In Case You Missed It with Khristina Williams is an iHeart Women's Sports production in partnership with Deep Blue Sports and Entertainment. Welcome to another episode of In Case You Missed It with Khristina Williams here on iHeartRadio. WNBA fans, the season has officially wrapped, and we're headed into the WNBA postseason. So it's only right that we invite WNBA Commissioner Cathy Engelbert this week to join us on the show. We're going to talk all things WNBA playoffs. We're going to get into a little bit of league growth and expansion, some of those CBA negotiation talks, and of course talk about what's ahead and the future of the league. So without further ado, I want to welcome Commissioner Cathy Engelbert to In Case You Missed It. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, Khristina, great to see you. And it's great to be here at an exciting time running into the playoffs.
Absolutely. And we're going to dive into the playoffs. But before we get started with that, we start every podcast with our guests sharing a win of the week. And that could be something personal or something business related. But Commissioner, what was a win for you this week?
Well, this week, there's a lot going on, as you know, in the W. And I think just, the Valkyries being the first ever expansion team in year one to make the playoffs probably is up there at the win of the week, because I don't think a lot of people predicted with the roster they started the season with that they'd be there. So I'd say the Valks making the playoffs.
Yeah, and we're going to dive into some of the Valkyries and the success that they've had this season. But let's start with the new playoff format. Lots of exciting things happening for the WNBA playoffs. How do you think this structure elevates the experience for the postseason, not only for the players, but for the fans, having an expanded round one and a round for the finals?
Yeah, let's talk about the finals first. So, one thing I've learned now being in sports a few years is games of consequence are so important to fans, to media partners, to everyone who's watching and following. And so other sports have 7-game final series, and, we're a sports media and entertainment property, and we needed to have 7. Can you imagine last year's finals between Minnesota and the Liberty? Had that been able to go to 7 games? It went to our max 5 last year and was such an amazing going to overtime in the last game. So it struck me, and I've been thinking about this for many years, that we need to go to 7 games too. So the finals are going to be really exciting, and there's so much parity in this league this year. So I'm excited to see who even makes it through to the semis into the finals. And obviously in round one, everybody gets a home game this year. So it'll be a 1-1-1 structure. That's what's different. We did have a 3-game last year, but it was 2-1. Everybody will get a home game this year, which will be great for the fans of both teams that get paired in the first round of the playoffs.
Yeah, and this playoffs will feature lots of historic firsts and storylines. But you mentioned the Golden State Valkyries, and this is an expansion team that's reaching the playoffs for the first time in its inaugural season, a WNBA first. When you think about this storyline in particular, what does it say about the depth of talent in the league today, particularly when it comes to the expansion franchises that will be coming in over the next few years?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are always skeptical when you bring expansion franchises in. It adds more roster spots to the total. We went from 144 to 156, and we're going to get up to 218 by the end of the decade with the additional expansion teams we announced. And it's important to balance that. And I think the Valkyries have proven with this incredible playbook off the court and on the court that you can be successful in year one. And that's what we want for all of our expansion franchises. So obviously, the Valkyries didn't have a ton of huge names. They had some stars like Kayla Thornton and others, but, they have just, I think Natalie and Ohema have just done an incredible job, and Jess Smith on the business side has done an incredible job. So, kudos to the ownership team and the fan experience and the basketball and kind of game presentation that's going on at Chase Center, and the sellouts, the 22 consecutive sellouts in year one. Every game was a sellout. So really excited for that success and for that to be a roadmap for other expansion teams to benefit from and to succeed off of.
Commissioner, what are some of the other storylines that are exciting you coming into the postseason?
Yeah, I think just kind of the parity kind of in the middle of the pack, which we just had our last playoff spot determined in the next to last game of the year with Seattle getting in, but LA won last night, and had Seattle lost, then it would come down to Thursday night, our last game. So just so many great storylines with Alyssa Thomas and what Phoenix has done this year. The Atlanta Dream I don't think anyone predicted them to be 2-3, and they're sitting there tied with the Aces right now. The Aces 15-game winning streak after a tough maybe first half of the season, but coming off the All-Star break, and Asia Wilson. And then the MVP race with Asia and Nafisa and Alyssa Thomas being kind of grouped together, the Coach of the Year race, Rookie of the Year race. I mean, there's so many great storylines coming into the playoffs here that I can't pick one. But, I think you're going to see a really exciting first round, probably our most exciting first round in our history.
Yeah, and this season in particular, several key stars have missed some games, and the Indiana Fever are on the path to make a postseason berth as well, clinching a spot, but without their star Caitlin Clark. When you think about the number of injuries this season and going into the postseason, how does the league continue to build the momentum when some of the star power may be sidelined?
Yeah, I've said this before. Injuries are it's one of the toughest things in sports. But the reality is, you're already seeing it in the NFL. There's high profile ones in other sports. And it's totally unfortunate that we've had high profile injuries this year. Our data shows it's about, the same injury rates as last year. But I know that doesn't make anyone feel any better. But obviously, we constantly work with players and team doctors and trainers and health staff and utilize data to ensure we're doing everything we can do to keep our players from a health perspective. But they're incredible athletes on the court, and the game is really fast and physical. And, I'm so impressed with, how they play this game and what they're putting on the court every night, and the talent, the speed. I played Division I college basketball at Lehigh University, and I don't think I ever lifted a weight. We had no strength and conditioning. We had no nutrition, nutritional aspects back then. And I think I'm just so impressed, and, how much respect I have for what the players are doing day in and day out. So it's an unfortunate part of the game, but we think we've built, beyond one player, or two players, or five players, or six players. Every team has to have a roster where people can step up and show up. And I think sports has shown that a lot of role players help you win championships. And I think Indiana making the playoffs, Golden State making the playoffs, they've had injuries. New York's had injuries. Almost every team in the league has had some significant injuries this year. So, but they've all persevered, and we're going to have a great slate of 8 teams, fighting for a championship.
Another area I think of concern was regarding the officiating this season. I know that's something that's talked about year over year. What steps is the league taking to ensure the fair and consistent calls are being made throughout these high stake playoff games?
Yeah, I think, Khristina, I smiled when you started that question, because I don't think it's just this year. I think every year everybody complains about officiating, by the way, in every sport. So, but that means people care. They care so much. And we hear the concerns from the ecosystem in our league, whether it's fans, players, coaches. We take it seriously. We understand there's frustration. Our game is constantly evolving. We just talked about the speed, talent, and physicality, and we recognize that, as leagues change and rules change, and players get bigger and stronger and faster, and officiating needs to change. So as our game evolves, we'll continue to work hard on officiating. We do have a thorough process. I didn't know this until I came into a league, because I was one of those complaining about officiating in all sports before I became a commissioner. But thorough process to becoming an official, extensive training and education, but also the accountability on a nightly basis. Every single game, every single play, call or non-call, is reviewed. There's evaluations, so teams have the opportunity to provide feedback. So we're working as hard as we can to make sure we're getting consistent officiating, but I understand the frustrations and we hear them.
I'm curious about when the league expands to 18 teams, will you consider possibly changing the format again to maybe conferences instead of the top 8 seed?
Yeah, it's interesting. Clearly at 12, we didn't have the scale to do that. And we want the 2 best teams fighting for that championship in the finals. And sometimes when you do conference play, you miss that, or at least that's my understanding before I came in, of why we changed from conference to obviously just a seeding system. So I think it's certainly something that'll be on the docket when we get to 18 teams in 2030. I don't think there'll be changes before then. Do you need to get to 20 teams before you do it, so you have 10 and 10 versus 9 and 9? Those are all the things we'll evaluate with our ownership group and with the Players Association as we get into that era. But for now, I think we are providing a platform and a path for the best 2 teams to end up in the WNBA finals.
I want to pivot the conversation a little bit right now and talk about the state of the league and some of the growth that you've been able to see in your tenure as commissioner of the WNBA. When you look back to when you first stepped into this role, how would you compare the state of the WNBA then compared to now?
Yeah, Christine, it's a great question and framed really well. I can't be more proud of the growth that we've experienced. I have a mantra every year. Last year, it's the bold will win, everything must change. This year, because we had such explosive growth. I mean, we brought in 30 to 40 million new fans last year. So this year, it's sustain and gain. So sustain that momentum and gain off of it. And that's exactly what we've done. So we're riding an incredible wave of momentum. We're up across every business metric, but viewership, merch sales, digital engagement, you name it. Attendance, as you stated, that I think we have the highest attendance in the history of the league. And it's not just because we have more games, because there used to be more teams. So we're doing it with 13 teams in a 44-game season. So this is a period of hyper growth, and that growth, we know that that's not forever. Growth is never linear. Every decision we're making is focused on the long-term sustainability of this league. But again, you have to start with a great product or service when you're growing any business. And we got a great product on the court. And now our teams are all investing heavily. And there's a huge amount of confidence, not just in the WNBA women's sports. I want to say we led with that confidence when we raised that capital a few years ago. And then again, just with the players, the electric experience, the atmosphere. I mean, it's different than 5 years ago when I came in. It's really different when I walk into arena. And even when I walked into the inaugural home game for the Golden State Valkyries at Chase Center, I walked in and this is the first time for a professional WNBA team there. And it was as if these fans had been following this team for the 29 years the W had been in existence. I mean, that's impressive. And I told you Lake of that, and said just it's incredible what happened out in the Bay Area, which I knew when I came in, Khristina, because you and I have talked about how in sports you need scale. 12 teams was not enough for the longest tenured women's professional sports team in the country. So we're getting to scale now with up to 18 teams, and just really proud of the growth. And again, but we need to continue to capitalize off that momentum. And we've got still some low-hanging fruit, as I called it in my business world, around globalizing this game and making these players really global icons, global household names, not just United States and Canada.
Yeah, a few things I want to touch on in terms of what you just shared with us in terms of sustain and gain. In what ways have we seen the league or you make it easier to become a WNBA fan? I know from a coverage standpoint, 7 seasons ago when I started covering the WNBA, it was really hard to find data, stories, updates on the league. And that's sort of what inspired me to get started in terms of being a media member covering the league. But in what ways have the league made it easier for fans to get access to these sort of things?
Yeah, great. Another great question, because one of the things when I came in was like, what's our strategy? And we went with a very simple 3-pronged strategy when I came in. We're going to be player first, stakeholder success, and fan engagement, fan experience. So you asked this question on the third pillar, fan engagement. And the other thing is like a CEO's job or a commissioner's job in this case is 3 things: culture, strategy, and capital allocation. So when we think about, setting the culture and putting a big one of 3 pillars be player first, we needed to gain the players' trust. The players had to say, this is a league I want to play in for my career. The strategy, 3-pronged, and then the capital allocation. Well, when I came in, we had no capital. So that's one thing that's changed a lot. We raised capital. And what's the first thing we do? We allocated that to making it easier to be a fan. An entire digital transformation. Khristina, when I came in, we had 25,000 outdated pages on WNBA.com, and our app was clunky, not easy to use, and our league pass was clunky. And so evaluated how do you get that digital transformation done with the resources we have. We hired engineers, data scientists, WordPress. We had, we were lacking in the social media space too. And we invested in all of that. And then marketing. I mean, sports leagues and sports teams, it's marketing that helps you be successful, because you need 3 things. You need, games of consequence, obviously coming up on our playoffs. That's our games of consequence. You need household names. And how do you get household names? Marketing. I mean, I always reflect on, Michael Jordan, what a great player he was, but then he and Nike and that partnership, really set the stage for how you really market and build not just Michael's brand, but the brand of the league. So we needed a lot of transformation, a lot of investment, a lot of capital allocated to make it easier to be a fan. You see our app now, it's like watch, buy. So buy tickets, rep, buy merch, and it's working. It's working to kind of bring it back to our fans and get our fans to be fans of teams and players, not just the league, because they might have viewed it as the right thing to do because we stand for the power of women in sports. So some subtle changes there, some not so subtle changes there, but it was all about a capital allocation strategy to make it easier to be a fan. So thanks for that question, because it's important that people recognize 3 years ago, we wouldn't have been ready for this onslaught of all these tens of millions of new fans coming into the league. We identified that we weren't making it easy to be a fan, and now we've made it easier. We still have work to do as we get lots of fan input, and we love it. Still have work to do, but we've come a long way.
Yeah, my next question stems from I attended the last home game this week, the New York Liberty versus the Washington Mystics, and I saw fans wearing shirts that said that they've been priced out of their ticket memberships for next season. And maybe this is a question more for a team owner rather than commissioner, but I would love your insight on this. As we speak about hyper growth and the league gaining momentum, how does the league balance that growth with keeping games accessible for fans or more affordable?
Yeah, it's certainly a balance. But on the other hand, when you've arrived as a legitimate sports media and entertainment property, and one of the things that's happened with women's sports, it's always been undercovered, underinvested in, et cetera. And now that we're seeing some success, supply and demand would say in any economic model, in order to fund all these investments and owners are making, and obviously paying the players more, which we'll do in this next CBA cycle, which I'm sure you're going to ask me about. But that's the reality. If you're going to build an economic model that's sustainable for decades. And remember, we're the longest tenured women's professional sports league in the country by double any other. And why is that? Because we've been very disciplined about how we're building the economic model here and the economic growth, not just to last for the next 5 years under some new CBA, but to last for decades, Khristina. And that's our responsibility as a league and the team owners. And to do that when there's, high demand, prices go up. That's just simple economics. So while I hope we didn't price out, families and a lot of our fans, I realize there's some issues in the system, but we do have to balance that with ultimately how this league has arrived in the sports landscape as a true sports media and entertainment platform for these players. I mean, the players are thriving with endorsements. There's not almost an ad spot in any sport that you're watching that doesn't now have a WNBA player in it. That wasn't happening 5 years ago. And so brands are really stepping up because they want you to see these diverse WNBA players and ultimately buy their products because they're supporting that. So it's all kind of interrelated to the economic model. But I realize there's some concern out there, certainly, that we're not priced out, our kind of core fan base.
Yeah, and you brought up the CBA, so I guess I'll go ahead and ask the question.
Figured I'd give you that.
Reaching the October 31st deadline, where do the negotiations currently stand between the league and the Players Association right now?
Yeah, our number one priority is to get a new CBA done that really balances and addresses the players' priority. We're all in on their priorities. We want to pay them significantly more, given the growth in the league. But we also need to support the long-term growth and success of the league and the teams and the owners. And we've been meeting with the Players Association throughout the summer. We'll continue until this gets done. We have many additional sessions already scheduled through the rest of the season and beyond. And I always tell people, I didn't play, there was no WNBA when I came out of college, but if there was, I want the same things the players want. That has not changed. We are going to significantly increase their salaries and benefits, but setting up this long-term sustainable economic model for everyone, because I think the players want that as their legacy too. And the negotiation process takes time, a remarkable amount of attention, detail, research, models. Obviously, we're forecasting where the league's going to go. We're in hypergrowth. That'll level off. So it really is an opportunity, I think, to shape women's basketball and women's sports for generations to come. And I think, again, we're hopefully on track to get something done and hopefully something that the players view is fair and our owners view as fair. And that's our role as the league, is to sit between those two constituents and make sure that WNBA is a business that people want to invest in and that our players are set up for success.
I have a few questions. So you mentioned globalization of the game, and it's not lost on me that this season in particular, we saw an uptick in international players committing full time to the league. When you think about that in the context of the prioritization rule, right? What is going to be the priority moving forward in terms of finding some common ground between the league and international players coming over, or just the prioritization rule in general?
Well, first, I think one of the amazing evolutions in our league has been, and I've admired the NBA for their global platforms and their percentage of players born outside the United States. So I think when I came in the league 5 years ago or so, we were 8% of our players were born outside the United States, and now it's 22% this year. So that's a huge international audience that we still have some work to do to make sure we're bringing in, that our games are provided in different languages, et cetera. So global growth is going to be the cornerstone of our league's future. And, the Toronto Tempo joining next year is a major step, but that's, North America still. And we hosted our first ever regular season game outside the United States in Vancouver this year with the Atlanta Dream and Seattle Storm. We'll continue to bring WNBA to international markets. And one thing that was interesting, like our reach is becoming especially strong in China and other places in Asia and Europe. I mean, China, our All-Star Weekend drew 6.1 million unique viewers across the Chinese media platform. So that was the number one most watched WNBA game in China. So we did the same thing a few years ago in India when we showed some of our games in the Indian market. So huge global growth, that we're looking forward to, really, again, as I said, making these players into household names, household global names, not just domestic names. So, really good. And our players, we want them to choose, what they want to do in the off season, want them to choose what they do in season, where they play. And again, I think we offer such a great platform. Our games are available in 207 countries through all of our platforms, whether it's NBA TV or Amazon or WNBA League Pass or the local affiliates of media partners in countries around the world. So I think, again, enormous opportunity. And this is players' opportunity. I mean, Nike took Sabrina Ionescu to Asia this year. What a great opportunity for her to build her fan base, the Liberty fan base, and the league fan base, in places like the Philippines and Hong Kong and China. And I know a lot of our players hail from Africa. So, ultimately, do we get to that continent, but certainly low-hanging fruit in Europe. I mean, Khristina, when I was at the Olympics in Paris, I said one of the best vibe games, fan-based games, was Belgium-France women's semifinal in Paris. I mean, it was an incredible show of support for women's basketball in those two countries' teams. So a lot going on there, but we feel we have the best players in the world here, both U.S. and international, and we'll continue to offer them a huge platform here to grow their brands.
So ultimately, would you say that's something that you guys are looking to revisit in terms of not changing it completely, but finding some common ground with the prioritization rule?
Yeah, no, we've been working with FIBA and others, and I think, some of the leagues have accommodated, and, our players need to show up, when training camp starts, because that's an important training ground to build culture so that they can hit the ground running when the season starts. And I think there's probably only a couple now that you're probably referring to, but I think for the most part, our players want to be in market to start the ground running. Our preseason games were the most watched preseason games ever. We made sure they were all produced, they were shown. We did a college tour. I mean, players who play overseas, whether they're U.S. players or international players, they want to be there to experience that and to give the fan base and to build their brands and to build the culture and the winning culture to win a championship. So they'll make those decisions. But I think, for the most part, I think we've been in a good place with some of the international leagues.
Yeah, and then just looking ahead with expansion, we have two teams coming in 2026, and then one of the biggest free agency periods, I think, in the history of the league coming next year. In the context of the CBA and the deadline, how is the league preparing for that? All of those big dates coming up.
So we have those dates. We have a draft lottery to run. We have the expansion, a two-team expansion draft. We have free agency, which, when we get the CBA done, will be, towards the end of January or February. It is going to be fun, and it's going to be a roller coaster, I think, for a lot of teams who you may end up, with totally different rosters than you have this year. You may solidify your roster. And obviously, then you're going to be looking at Toronto and Portland starting up teams and starting up rosters. And they've got a little bit of a playbook now from Golden State. So, yeah, it is going to be fun. It's going to be fun to follow and write about and storytell around. But, I think the players are really smart. And there's so many free agents in the veteran ranks because they know that, we're going to return a lot of the growth to them in this collective bargaining.
Anything you could share with us in terms of the timeline of that expansion draft process? Any
Yeah, I
details?
mean, there's nothing to share. Obviously, we'd like it to be relatively consistent with last year, but that's subject to when we get the collective bargaining agreement done. So we have some time for that. But that'll all filter out after that. Obviously, our broadcast partners are very interested in this amazing free agency period. So hopefully, again, everything will kind of fall in place once we get the CBA done.
There's been lots of talk about the Connecticut Sun and that franchise's future. I know not through 2026, but 2027 and beyond. What's your message, I guess, for Connecticut Sun fans who may be worried about losing their team or just have questions about whether this is going to be a team that's potentially going to be sold or relocated?
Yeah, and I've heard from a lot of their fans, which is great. They have a big passion. The Mohegan Tribe's been a great partner of the league for many years since the Connecticut Sun moved up to Connecticut. All I will tell you is that the Mohegan Tribe is running the strategic process. This is their process. We've received periodic updates from them since they announced their intention to look at strategic options, whether that's a sale of the team, a minority sale of the team, nothing, and build a practice facility and obviously, this isn't their core business, but they've been so supportive over the past, decade plus. And I think, obviously, you see the interest and everybody writing about it, but that's a good sign that everybody's interested in what happens here because we haven't had a team sale in many years. So the interest from several potential ownership groups in major markets is a huge testament to where the WNBA is and where we're headed and the demand. With that being said, we do have rules and processes in place that teams follow. Every league has very similar rules. And so obviously a lot's been written about what's going on. I wouldn't believe everything you read in this case, but obviously we want the best success for Mohegan, for the Connecticut Sun, and for the team. So obviously they're still looking at their strategic options and determining what they want to do. And we've been in touch with them periodically.
You said that you wouldn't believe everything you read. Anything you want to clarify? Anything that you can clarify?
I mean, I'm not the type to sit there and point by point, but look, there's various markets across the country that have shown viability to hosting a WNBA team. When we announced the most recent expansion, we had 13 cities bidding for a WNBA team. Obviously, we announced 3 with Cleveland, Detroit, and Philadelphia. There's other cities that have been great homes for our league. There are processes for relocation. So nothing beyond that, but it's like every league has a process. The W is no different. And you need a process because then it would be chaos if you let anybody move to anywhere they wanted to go. And there's some great markets out there. And we just went through a huge process to determine which ones we would give the next X teams to. And we decided on 3. We kind of set out thinking 16 teams and we went to 18 because there was huge demand. And these were really, really legitimate ownership groups who are going to be all in on investing in the W. So that's what we look for when we look for, bringing in new owners into the league.
Yeah, and the 3 new owners through 2030 have NBA affiliations. Is that something where the league is given priority versus the independent groups that are trying to come in and get teams?
I get asked that a lot. And there's no exact bias, but the factors we look at are arena, practice facility, investment, long-term viability in that market. We look at demographics and psychographics and college teams based in that market and current WNBA viewership and fandom because we know who's buying our merch now that we have a whole data set. We have data scientists. We know who's watching viewership. Like the Bay Area, scored so high on all those. We had about 25 metrics and we put 100 cities through those 25 metrics. So I'm a real data geek, Khristina, and we've got a ton of data on how we think teams will be successful. That's what we used when we granted Golden State. Obviously, Portland and Toronto are unaffiliated NBA teams, and then the next 3 will be affiliated. So we'll have about half and half affiliated and unaffiliated. But, the arena and the practice facility do mean a lot because our free agency is so active now. And what are players looking for? Player experience and arena and fan base and practice facility and everything you would invest in the player experience are an important part of that. So we want these teams to be successful. And so I think some of those NBA teams we just granted franchise to really have a great platform to spring off of to be successful as a WNBA with a WNBA franchise.
And very quickly, Unrivaled this week, they announced that their league is now valued at over $300 million, which is up in just the short 9-month span. Obviously, Unrivaled, they've been planning this league for several years. But what are some things that the league can take away from, the success that that league has had just 9 months?
Yeah, again, we raised our capital a few years ago. You need to have financial capital to hire human capital to make yourself successful. I know they just announced another capital raise, so back to back. Like again, usually you do a capital raise in 3 to 5 years, you deploy it and grow. They announced another one, which is where the valuation is coming off to. But we are all in on supporting women's basketball in this country and beyond. We've got a lot of global upside for the WNBA. So I mean, I think, obviously our star players are playing both in Unrivaled and in AU, and some still go overseas and some live overseas if they play overseas in the off season. So we want our players to have as much opportunity to grow. And I think it's great when Unrivaled's done. But again, we're focused on continued growth of the W during our season. And obviously we've been supportive of them and Athletes Unlimited and others as they give opportunities for our players to play in the off season.
The league is at 44 regular season games. Can we see a potential extension of the regular season in the future?
Yeah, I think as you think about the growth and you think about, wanting to maintain this balance between games of consequence, our footprint, there's some people think we shouldn't go too far into the NBA and then NFL seasons, and there's others that think we should. We already obviously go into the NFL season, especially with our playoffs coming up and the NFL just launching. So we balance all that. We use data for that too. What percentage of NFL fans are also WNBA fans, and same thing with the NBA, college basketball, hockey. There's so much data you can use to determine what the right footprint. We obviously are challenged every other year with an international competition like the Olympics or the FIBA World Cup. So next year we'll have to break for the FIBA World Cup before our playoffs and then kind of come back and finish the season and playoffs. So again, we work with FIBA, we work with the USOPC, we work with the Olympic schedule, USA Basketball. So there's a lot of constituents in figuring out how many games we should play. But I'm thrilled that we are able to play a year like this year without an Olympic year or FIBA World Cup where we could get our max 44 under the current CBA in. But there's a huge demand for our game, and you saw it with preseason games, and you saw it during the season with our most ever viewed ABC CBS season and our most attended season ever. So there is the demand there. So we want to balance that with the footprint and what's right for our players and player health and safety.
As a fan of the game, Commissioner, and you just brought up the preseason, are there plans to go to other countries to continue to have those preseason stints and exhibition games with different national teams around the world?
Yeah, we would love to do something like that. Again, it's an allocation of capital decision because it's expensive just to fly to these countries, let alone put on an entire, tentpole event. So we'd love to do that. That's what we're strategizing right now. And we'll use this all season to strategize. Next year with the FIBA World Cup, not going to probably do that, but hopefully in 27, prior to the 28 Olympics, we'll have a great footprint to blow out maybe some global game strategy. But it can't just be like we're going to play a game here or there. It's got to be a strategy that's integrated with growing our players' fan bases, growing their brands. So you'll see us in the next year doing a lot of player-oriented, attending in ex-US countries to build their brands so that that our fan base is ready when we come over there. And it's not so hard to do like it is. And I've admired the global game strategy. The NBA, they were ahead of all the other sports leagues who are now doing it, like the NFL and the NHL. But the NBA has been doing it a long time. So we're taking some cues from how they've been successful. But they've grown a whole global game strategy. But they've also grown a whole global platform strategy. And one of those things is like Nike taking, I remember Kobe Bryant, Stephon Marbury to Asia and growing their brands there before they then did games there. So there's something to be said about that strategy that we're working with also our corporate partners and our media partners on what the best way to grow that strategy is. So that's definitely next up once we get our collective bargaining agreement done.
And lastly, looking ahead to the future, what is your vision for the WNBA's future and the impact you hope to leave as, the first ever commissioner of the league?
Yeah, and I don't think a lot about legacy or impact. Everybody asks me that question, especially because knowing that I spent 33 years somewhere else before I came here and that I'm not going to work forever, hopefully. But I think just setting this league up for decades, And one of the things that every time I'm in arena, Khristina, and you see it because you're in a lot of our arenas, to see these young girls and boys watch these players, and some moms and dads are bringing those kids for the first time to a W game and not other professional sports. I mean, it's incredible the experience that our arenas and our teams and our players are now giving to that next generation. And we know that next generation, that sports is the big uniter. They're growing up in a very divided society, but what does sports do? Unites. And there's nothing better than when you see these young kids and these teenagers and now young adults high-fiving the older fan in our arena, the diverse fan in our arena. It literally is a uniter in an otherwise very divided time. So that's what I hope to leave back, is that we brought, tens of thousands of fans in arenas every night, and then 10+ million fans into the game for the first time, and gave them a great experience that helped them, with kind of all the societal stresses that they have. But sports can be that place to get away from it and to unite with, every type of person that's in our arena. I always say, not only do we have the most diverse league in sports, we have the most diverse fans in sports. And it's so great to sit in those arenas and see that fandom.
Yeah, absolutely. Sports bring us all together. Commissioner Engelbert, I want to thank you for coming on in case you missed it this week. And we are super excited about the playoffs, WNBA fans. The playoffs start on Sunday, September 14th. So make sure you tune into the WNBA postseason. Thank you so much for joining us this week.
Thank you, Khristina. And look forward to seeing you on the road to the playoffs.
Sure thing. Have a great one.
Thank you. You too.
In Case You Missed It with Khristina Williams is an iHeart Women's Sports production in partnership with Deep Blue Sports and Entertainment. You can find us on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.